Happy Friday, friends. We have such a great episode for you today. So I had the pleasure of speaking with Lori Hetherington and Monica Sharp, respectively president and vice president of the Florence Literary Society. Curious about the FLS, how it was born, and the incredible events and workshops they organize for our community? Well, stay right where you are because we're about to talk about it. This episode is brought to you by Exclusive Connection, the Florence-based luxury travel company crafting bespoke experiences for travelers who crave something more than sightseeing. People like me who want a story, a hidden gem, a place so magical that it feels like it can't possibly be real. So whether you're tracing the footsteps of your favorite author, literary character, or artist, Exclusive Connection offers extraordinary visits that will set your imagination free. Start your literary adventure at exclusiveconnection.it. And now to Lori and Monica. Grazie mille e buon ascolto. Buongiorno, Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. I am so happy to be sitting down today with the Florence Literary Society, and in particular with two members, the president and the vice president, Lori Hetherington and Monica Sharp. Welcome to the podcast. I am so happy to have you here because the Florence Literary Society is a thing that's been around for a long time, but it's also recently taken a new and exciting sort of, let's say, shape and form. So the first thing I want to do is welcome you to the podcast. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I am very grateful to the Florence Literary Society personally for the role that it has had in my life, especially in the last year or so. And it means a lot to me to have you both here today because I believe strongly in the Florence Literary Society, and I see the concrete ways that it's changing people's lives. So I am really happy to dive right in. I thought we could start with Lori, who's the president, and I really just want to get a sense of where you both come from and what brought you here in the first place. And then we'll talk about the Florence Literary Society more specifically.
Okay, thank you, Fosca, so much for this invitation. It's a real pleasure to speak about the Florence Literary Society because we too are really excited about it. So I have been here in Italy since 1986.
Wow.
Yes, and I've gone through various lifetimes, let's say. I currently am a translator from Italian to English, work primarily with independent authors, but I also am a ghostwriter and an editor, and I occasionally get a chance to write my own things too.
Which is amazing.
It is.
Considering how much you do. Exactly. I'm saying, like, how can you even, I mean, you do so much. And why are you here in Italy? I mean, you mentioned that you've been here since 1986.
Oh, it's the classic story. I came with a man who, after 2 years, left and I stayed.
That's not a classic story.
No.
That's a twist. I like that story.
It's a twist. The guy I came with had 2 passports. And after 2 years, he left and I stayed.
Interesting, because sometimes your destiny is just that, you know, and it's independent. You know, sometimes people bring you places and then they go.
Right.
And you really cultivate your life here.
Yeah.
So it was a sort of a...
I never made an actual conscious decision to stay.
Yeah.
I ended up staying for such a long time because of the people that I connected with. Italy is a beautiful, wonderful place. Florence is amazing for all of the typical reasons. But the reason that I've stayed for so long is because of the people who have been in my life, personally, professionally, neighbors, random strangers. That really has made the difference for me.
Yeah, just the life that you've chosen to lead for, here.
Yes.
So interesting.
Not consciously, but it just happened.
It just happened. I mean, I think my story is similar too. I think a lot of us are. And you, Monica?
Yes, hi.
Hi, welcome.
Very happy to be with you today. Here on the podcast. About myself, ironically, I am the opposite of you two. It was a very conscious decision for my family and I to return to Italy this time. We've now been here going on 10 years.
Wow.
My husband and I have both been active in Europe, living, working, studying, researching, taking student groups in one form or another, either as students ourselves or, as older people since 1993. So we have both been active in Europe now for over 30 years, off and on, and then more consistently as years grew. But We came back for good in 2016 after having lived in Italy twice. In 2005 in Florence, and then in 2012 and 13 in Arezzo when our son was 1. We moved back to Italy with both kids in 2016, and I very much wanted to return to Italy. It was a very conscious choice, but ironically with an American husband, which I think that's my little twist. But he's secretly Italian. I joke that he's the first of Italian.
I know other people though who have that story too now.
Yes, I
which
love
was
it.
less common in the past, but now I've met a lot of younger couples who come here, consciously together to Italy to raise their family or whatever, which is nice.
Yes. So he was the job that we moved here with.
Okay.
So he is the director of Gonzaga in Florence.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Which hosts approximately 500 students a year.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of faculty and staff. It's a very big, well-developed program. And then I came with a full-time remote job. I was working in software development.
Okay.
But really missed my work in immigration. And as you know, about 6 years ago, I began working with a local immigration practice, Capecchi Legal Studio. And we do a lot of work with incoming people to Italy who are getting visas and citizenship by descent. When I'm not doing all that, I also work as a professional writer and editor and publish when I can my own work, and very active just with literary people.
Which is a good, group of people to be active with. So this brings me to my next question, because I'm learning all these things about the both of you today that I never knew. How did you two meet? Where's the connection there?
I think it was at a publishing day.
I think it was Publishing Day 2019.
2019.
That was the last one.
Yes. Because I'll just fill that
Please.
Kind of background in. There was a publishing day that ran for 4 years, from 2016 to 2019 here in Florence, organized by a loosely formed group called Florence Writers.
Okay.
Headed by the wonderful Mundy Walsh, who was the cultural director at St. Mark's Church.
Yes. Okay.
And so...
And Randa Cypress.
And Randa Cypress also.
Right. Okay.
And so I was kind of her helper, let's say, in organizing the publishing day. And that's really where the idea of Florence Literary Society got off the ground again. Got off the ground, actually, because we wanted to resurrect that event, which was very, very both popular and successful.
Okay. And so so you said obviously it stopped because of the pandemic.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so what was happening then? So this huge event, which I know has now been reinstated, and you'll be talking about that, I hope, a little bit later on the podcast. So in the meantime, there's this group of people, a good, small, dedicated group of literary people who want this project to happen. What happens then in those black years, like in those dark years? What's going on with the Florentine writing community, guys?
As you remember, for about 2 years in there, we were very limited in what anybody could do in terms of gathering in person. And I don't think, was anybody even meeting on Zoom, or
There were a couple of small groups that met on Zoom periodically. A few, just one-on-one kind of situations.
Sure.
Let's have coffee, please.
Yes.
Can you read my work? That kind of a thing.
Okay.
And it was really, I think that the community really kind of disintegrated in a certain sense, in large part because some people left
for good.
For good, yeah.
It was really a turnover.
And then there was no influx. There were no new people moving in, and that really had an impact on the community, because the new voices, the new energy, the new people helped to animate the group as a whole.
Exactly. And Florence has always been a very transient city. And I think that's why it's always been very appealing to artists and writers. It has a long history. But you're right. I think I talk about it a lot on the podcast. And I've been reading articles recently about what the world looks like now, right? And things that we might have forgotten about the pandemic. I really don't think people who weren't here, I do not think they have any idea.
They absolutely don't.
How bad it was for us. It was so isolated.
5 years ago, we were just starting that hard lockdown.
Right.
People in America say, why don't you go have a picnic? I was like, we cannot leave our homes.
We had to send. I was working for Stanford, you know this. Your husband works for Gonzaga. And within something like, I'm not joking, like within 24 hours, we had to get our stuff together and get the students safely home. Yeah. And I remember people were really like, come on, you're being ridiculous, everything. we ended up sending our students back like about a week or 10 days before the Spain program did, because it was, the pandemic really just had, really, really broke here in Italy. And I was just thinking about it the other day. And I don't think that many people can understand just how it was really hard those first few days. Yep. It was very isolating first few days, first few months.
53 days. I remember I marked them off on my calendar.
I know. And like in prison. And then I remember when I was hearing people, my friends, my family in the US and in other places, and everything was just kind of pretty. I mean,
they were jogging on the beach. They were having picnics.
It was very strange. It was very strange. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's important, because then all of a sudden, right, when we got out of the pandemic, Florence changed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I would like you to comment on that.
Well, in fact, because as writers, we are already used to being on our own. It took, I think, people a while to kind of realize that we could get back out. However, there was still the problem of meeting together, for example, for a book presentation or a reading.
Oh, yeah.
That took a really long time to start up again. Not so much because of the official restrictions, although that was part of it, but I think people were out of the habit of meeting together. Yeah. And in fact, I remember one of the very first brainstorming sessions that I was doing for the British Institute at their Soto space. It was as if people had forgotten how to interact.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And I remember that so clearly. And so that was kind of a part of the impetus to get this idea of reconsolidating the community, because we realized that it had really kind of fallen apart.
Yeah. And when we came out of that hard lockdown, and even for the rest of 2020, once we started getting out again, a lot of us were, who was still here?
Yes.
Oh, they left for good? I remember that. I had quite a few, they're gone. Oh, they left. We just had to, like the community had to restabilize so we could figure out who was still here.
Exactly. So fast forward to right now.
Okay.
2025 is a really exciting year for the Florence Literary Society.
It is.
So I want you to talk a little bit about what it is, about your inauguration, which was recent, and about all of the incredible things you have coming up in the next, you have a lot of stuff coming up. And it's quite apparent to me, and I'd like for one of you to comment on how the city has changed. And I think what I've seen, and I've been talking about this on the podcast, is I saw post-pandemic this huge influx of creativity. This immense wave of creative individuals of all ages deciding to come and live in Florence. And so I would imagine that that's playing out in interesting ways in the Florence Literary Society, because I see it really transforming the landscape of a city that I've lived in for almost as long as you have, Lori.
Right.
So we could sit here until we're blue, but also Monica, we could sit here until we're blue in the face and talk about all the different ways that Florence has changed, even just in the immediate wake of the pandemic. Yes. So I'm curious to hear, where is the Florence Literary Society, and how has the landscape changed, and how is that helping you with your mission?
Yes. So when Lori and I first started talking about this, January of 2024, we had been thinking, and other people had been expressing to us, gosh, when can Publishing Day start again? Because it was such a good event.
Yeah.
An important and enriching in-person event that really energized our local writers, translators, and word workers. And we said, okay, well, let's start talking about how we could make that happen. We knew it was not going to be a fast process, but we wanted to begin putting those pieces in place. How can we find out who's still here? Who is willing to do this? Who also feels like this is a good idea? And I think we started from there.
Well, because actually there were a few of us who started with the newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. The first edition of that newsletter came out in January of 23.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, okay.
So it actually was a full year of this monthly newsletter that preceded the actual formation or the actual discussion, let's say, of the Literary Society, because that first step with the newsletter was the first approach to reconsolidating, to find who else, who was here,
like
who was doing what,
located in the community, who's working, who's writing. Because
Yes.
so many small groups meet in Florence.
Exactly.
And everything was very siloed. A lot of people were like, well, I go to this one group, but there's all these other things happening too.
Yes.
The groups were not in communication with one another.
Not at all. Yeah.
And that became part of our conversation about the Florence Literary Society.
How to streamline it.
Could we create an umbrella
I love it.
that would welcome and nurture all the little groups and put all the little silos in communication to create ultimately a stronger and more robust community for all people, all creative workers, all writers and word workers in Florence?
Yes, in fact. I was just looking recently at our stats related to the newsletter, and the first newsletter had something like 87 addresses on the mailing list, and we're now up to something like 294.
That's amazing.
And our open
Yes.
rate is amazing.
Yes.
Everybody clicks to read.
It's a very good newsletter.
It's a very engaged
It's a very good
community.
newsletter. Well, you do, and this is what I'm glad this is a perfect segue because I mentioned earlier. I mean, Lori and I met. It's not even we haven't even known each other for that long, which is really funny because this happens. We've lived in Florence for a long time, but for some reason our paths didn't cross, and then our paths crossed at a writers' workshop, a conference last fall, and it was sort of I got swept up into this world that I didn't know existed. But then again, I was living in a parallel universe as well. And I've always been a writer and I'm a closet writer and I'm always hiding with my writing. And I met you and I met a couple of other writers who are also members and I felt so comfortable. And that for me, I just want to say this. I don't think I would have written my book if it weren't for you. Like I'm going to start crying because Lori and I met at this writers conference, and I met a couple of other amazing writers, local writers, and
Was
also
it Indie Uncon?
it was the
Yes.
Indie
Okay.
Uncon.
Yes.
And I met immediately Lori. I think the first 5 minutes we started chatting, and I was like, "Oh gosh, I really like you. You live here, wow!" And then after the conference, I wrote the book literally and Lori and I were in touch. You and I were in touch, and I came to your brainstorming session, so Done British, and I loved it. And I know you do it on Tuesday nights once a month. There's one next week. I'm trying.
Good.
But for me, it was like, wait, this wonderful community of kind, like-minded people that I can sit and talk about my work with and, comment on. This is so exciting. So for me, this was a game changer. And I don't think I'm the only one. So I want to talk about what you do for this community of creatives in Florence. You do a lot.
I mean, I would say one of the first aims is to help people find their tribe. Because when you are with other writers who understand what you're going through, what your challenges are, it is a game changer for a lot of people. So that is one step. The other thing that I would say, and then I'll pass it over to Monica, the other thing is that there are so many different kinds of writers. There are poets, there are people who are working on a memoir, there are translators, there are people who write copy for marketing.
Yeah.
There are, the range is incredible. And so we can't necessarily satisfy everyone's individual needs, but we can create a space for people to connect with other people.
Yeah.
And that idea of network is really crucial.
And it works. I just want to, at least in my case, it's worked incredibly well because in addition to the fact that it literally propelled me into action, all those meetings with you, something about being in spaces with other writers, especially in intimate spaces like the one you create on your Tuesday night brainstorming, that for me was this kind of aha moment. Wait, hold on. There are actually people who understand what I'm talking about. There are people who can help me. There are people who I can really say, I'm struggling with this. What can I do? But it was also for me, Lori, it was knowing that you were there. I don't know how else to explain it. Knowing that there were other people who really just got it. And that if I needed that little push, I could find it. And what happened is at both the brainstorming session that night, I met all these amazing people. And of course, I ran into people I know. Because people never tell you, right? Oh, you're going to the brainstorming session on Tuesday at the British, and then I just run into people there. It was actually also at the inauguration for the Florence Literary Society that I met this wonderful Irish writer who's based here in Tuscany. And so she and I have been talking. And so, creating all of those connections and talking to other writers, and whether they write poetry or graphic novels or whatever, or they do podcasts, it doesn't matter. But something about those spaces becomes magical when you put all those people together. So I'm really a huge fan. So in addition to, what are you actively doing? Like right now, if we look at an average month, March, tell me what kind of things are going on.
Gosh, well, we just finished Testo, which was the huge literary conference that Florence hosts annually. That was last weekend, weekend before last?
2 weeks,
almost 2 weekends ago. Yeah.
And we helped host two very well-known authors, Tracy Chevalier and Paul Murray, in person. Got to be kind of close and upfront with writers and with each other and in conversation and community in different places around the city. We are helping to host another writer on March 25th with Todomodo Libreria here in town. A Pulitzer Prize winning Nathan Thrall, who writes about Middle East, hot topic, and a lot of that. So the newsletter continues, our meetings continue. We are working to plan Publishing Day, which is, mark your calendars, October 25th, 2025.
Okay.
And that requires a lot of planning because there's going to be a lot of moving parts, and we're bringing it back.
Well, in fact, if we do look at the March newsletter calendar, let's say, so there are 2 or 3 writers groups that meet.
Like regular writers groups in the community.
Okay. Yes.
And those are every month, right? Pretty much.
Yes, those are regular
meetings, so
regular
people can count on those.
Yes. And then I do brainstorming on the third Tuesday. There are a couple of generative writing appointments.
Our workshops. Mark Jarman. We hosted Mark Jarman, a well-known Canadian writer.
In February.
And I'm giving a workshop. And March 29th at St. Mark's English Church, I will be talking about how to start getting published. If you feel like you're a writer or have always been a writer, what are some first steps you can take to begin building your publication portfolio, which is something I've really been working on in the last 6 years, and it has been so exciting. I just want to share that excitement with people.
And Monica, please do, because publishing has become a jungle as far as in other words,
I know this too.
I have this notion because I'm older, and also sort of what Lori was saying. I've always looked at writing as this very solitary process, right? My whole life, also a hidden process, which is not good. But now that I'm looking into the exciting world of publishing, I feel awful. It's terrible. It's so overwhelming how much writers have to do now. It's so different. And even just getting, it's a wild world. So thank you. And you should probably do more of those too.
It's one of my favorite topics now because I was on the other side of this 6 and 8 years ago and so frustrated and upset about how should I start? And the things I was doing were not effective and not successful. All I ever got were rejections and denials, and I was very down about it and kind of angry.
Of course you were.
And then I was able to reconsider and flip everything and look at it from a completely different perspective that ultimately became very fruitful for me. And I think it can work for other people too if they're just starting out. So
this is very useful. We're going to have to. Let's take a little break. Has our chat got you dreaming about Florence? Imagine a quiet morning visiting the city's library, starting with Michelangelo's Biblioteca Laurenziana and ending at one of Florence's off-the-beaten-path bookshops or literary cafés. With Exclusive Connection, you don't just visit Florence, you read it. Book your next chapter at exclusiveconnection.it. And now back to Monica and Lori.
This is an exciting workshop.
Very helpful, Monica, for a lot of people because I know I'm not the only one.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, and there's so much going on. It's a question of how can you distill this into something that you can not only access but work with.
Absolutely,
it is a lot. It's too much.
Yes, and this is part of the real value of the literary society is that information exchange and sharing that's so important. Because as I mentioned, writing is, when you sit down at your computer or with your notepad or your notebook, it is a solitary activity. But so many other aspects of writing involve others, whether it's brainstorming an idea, whether it is getting feedback on a first draft.
Absolutely.
Or finding a beta reader. Or later, when you do move into the publishing sphere, an agent. someone to help you with marketing. All of those other things that are related to books and publishing require others.
Yeah.
And sometimes people, forget that, and we have oftentimes that old image of the solitary writer sitting in front of his typewriter with a glass of whiskey.
Yeah.
And that's not realistic anymore.
No. And it's funny because, for me, I didn't realize that. I mean, I did, but I didn't. And so it wasn't, first of all, because I guess I didn't realize that a community existed. But when I was in it then, I was like, wait, why am I keeping this to myself? I could be gaining so much from, and I always joke about it, but I'm like, I don't know what happened, but something rubbed off on me. I really believe that being in the proximity of writers was a kick in the ass for me. Well, but it was because I was like, wait, I'm surrounded by all these people who are doing it. I can do it too.
In fact, we just speaking about that, the silent, private kind of thing. We just started also some silent writing sessions.
I saw
regular
those.
silent writing
that.
because
Me to write.
That idea of sitting in proximity with others who are writing there's just an energy that happens,
right?
And
also, if you are a procrastinator at all, and all of us have a tiny bit of that inside of us, some more than
just
others,
a little, Monica, just a little.
To know you have an appointment on your calendar to meet somewhere, sit down and write, I think really helps a lot.
I think it does, and I think something that we talked about, for example, at Lori's brainstorming is, a lot of people just, do have issues with writer's block or getting started or, which for me it was, what am I supposed to be writing now? It was, for me, it was a question of like, I have all these ideas, and then how do I find focus within that? And I think I joke with people and I say, I've been a writer all my life, but at a certain point I got serious about it. Mm-hmm. So I went and pursued writers and pursued conferences and pursued workshops and classes and said, I really want to do this. So I think there's something very valuable also when we look at it as something intentional, right? So I'm going to go tonight and I'm going to sit with a group of people and I'm going to get something done. Or even for me, getting over the fear of telling people, because it's intimidating. It's intimidating. You see people, it's intimidating. And for me, it was intimidating. And, being able to walk into a space where I knew that every single person in the room had gone through what I was going through at some point. So maybe for Lori, it was, it happened 20 years ago. Maybe for you, it happened 15 years ago. But I knew that everyone in that room understood what I was going through.
We've all been on the journey.
And that was really powerful for me. And feeling like, wait, and I rave about you to everybody. I talk about you. I'm like, are you a card-carrying member of the Florence Literary Society? Like I am? Are you aware of the benefits? Because it's something I'm really proud of.
That's wonderful. That really is wonderful. And it is so important in a community like ours that there are the people at the beginning of their journey who get that inspiration and that nudge.
Right.
And also for those who are farther along on their journey,
Indeed.
because being with the ones who are earlier in their journey, at the beginning of their journey, you get fresh ideas, you get enthusiasm, you get some of the perspective that maybe you have that has modified over time.
Absolutely.
So it's not just that it's great for the beginner or the person who's finally diving in seriously, but the effects and the benefits are across the entire spectrum.
Absolutely. And something I noticed at the inauguration, and I really appreciated, was the fact that the group was extremely international and intergenerational.
Very diverse.
So important because also that, all the different voices, the different perspectives, people at various points of their journeys, various disciplines. Those are exciting environments to be in. And I think in a city like Florence, I don't know, this is a question for both of you. I know a lot of visual artists have a hard time living here, right? Because they say, Florence got the art, the beauty everywhere. And it can be crippling as an artist, to create when you're like looking at Michelangelo every day and you're like, man, I don't know if I'm ever going to get there. Is Florence, this is a very personal question, but is Florence a good place? Do you feel like it's been a good place for you to be as a writer? I'm saying this to Lori now, but I'm also curious to hear from Monica what you think about Florence as a literary city or as a city that's a good fit for writers.
Well, my perspective is rather particular because I'm primarily a translator.
Yeah.
I have to say that it has been good for me because I do translate from Italian to English.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the midst of Italians.
Yeah.
I think that living in Florence does carry a certain, I don't know if the word is prestige, but it's an immediately recognizable locale, emotion, place, history. When I meet someone and I say, yes, I live in Florence, I know that they immediately have an image in their mind.
Yeah.
And somehow maybe that just kind of gives us an extra shine. I don't know.
I think a little. It makes us a little more interesting. Yeah, for sure.
And then because it is an international city, it means that there is a lot of that movement. And so you are able to be surrounded by other creatives of different types. And if I were living in a small village on the top of a mountain, that I would not have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So for me, yes, it's been a positive thing for sure.
Monica?
I am more writer than translator, although I dabble as well. I tell people that living in Florence is to be spoiled for inspiration. I feel like everywhere I walk, every corner I turn, every person I meet sparks some idea in me, and feeling like I am in a lineage of history and famous writers who have stopped off in Florence or passed through, like Stendhal, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Robert Browning, George Sand. I mean, all these people who have written and creatively produced here makes me feel like I am in some kind of like, I'm going to get a little woo, but like energy flow through the decades and centuries of this is a place where you can open up and wonder and begin to create. And that has been so valuable for me.
Yeah. I really like what you both said, because I think that it is an incredibly inspiring place to be, at least for me personally, on many levels as a creative in general. And it sort of brings us back to what we were talking about earlier. The community has changed here, okay? And so the Florence Literary Society has responded to it. There is this, it's undeniable. There's been a real shift in Florence. I see more creatives than ever of all ages coming. I find it to be an incredibly exciting time to be here. So I guess I'm curious to know how you envision the Florence Literary Society, evolving, growing, et cetera, in the coming months, years, et cetera, because this really feels like there's been a shift, I would say, even just probably in the last couple of years, I would say there's been a major shift. And it looks like things are stabilizing. Looks like there's a community that's, there's always people coming and going, but there's definitely like a base that's quite strong. So where is the Florence Literary Society going to be a year from now? Or where do you see yourselves in the future?
I think this is a great question, and I agree with you that the community has changed so much in the past 2 years. And just in my thinking and analyzing of recent history, I feel like so many people during the pandemic felt like they had to delay and postpone their life dream, whatever that was. And for a lot of people that was, I'd like to live abroad. I would like to expand my knowledge of culture and language and life by trying out somewhere else.
For sure.
Maybe like the quote bucket list item, but let's not wait until we're 65 or 70. Let's go sooner, because we
don't
never know. You don't know
That's
anymore.
what the pandemic taught all of us. People didn't want to wait anymore, because you wait and then you don't have any more time. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that now that, again, as Lori has said, we feel like our community has stabilized somewhat. Lots of new voices have come in, which has been wonderful, and we welcome them.
Yeah.
Our goals here are to, and this is actually a timely question because we're meeting today to talk about our strategic plan for the next 1, 3, and 5 years.
Perfect.
Where do we want to be? What kind of membership do we want to have? And how do we want to grow? And I think, as Lori and I were discussing just yesterday, it's important that we look at growth not for the sake of growth, but growth in the service of nourishing our community. How can we best build a robust network and a safe umbrella where things can happen and people can know without having to go find each silo on their own? We just really want to make that communication happen organically and in a warm way that makes it easy for people to access what is here for them, because it's so much.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's also the reality that many people, there are some people like you and I and Fosca who are here stably.
Right.
And there are other people who are here for 3 months out of the year.
Exactly.
There are students who are here for a semester. And then there are people who are just passing through. Now, within that, that group of those various groups, those who are living here stably are also Italians who communicate in English.
Yes.
We've got a number of
Many.
of people who are joining the association who are
English as a second language.
yes,
or
English as a
required
second
language.
yes.
Wonderful.
And so that fact of how our community is establishing itself and growing also means how is it going to be in the future, in the sense that people will take their connections and they may go back home for 8 months or 10 months. And they're still part of our community.
Right.
And so I can see how we will be not just Florence, but there may be connections. Let's say someone goes back to their home in I don't know, San Francisco, and they meet with their writers group there, and they say, I found this community in Florence of writers, and somebody, we're going to Florence next month, and that person then can find a writing home when they're here.
I love this. And I'm so glad you mentioned the student community as well, because
Yes.
for people who don't live in Florence, it's hard to understand. It's a college town. I mean, we know it's a tourist town. This is a town of young people. And I love the fact that that you mentioned the student community, whether that be, students at the University of Florence or students at one of the many U.S. college or university programs here in town. It's nice that they have that, as we were talking about earlier, that transient residents in Florence feel that they have this community, but then there are also these, wonderful reverberations. And so I guess that's that there are two questions I have. One is I want to know a little more about the publishing day that's coming up in October, because I think people are going to be interested in participating in that. So let's do a little more. I'm curious about that. And then you mentioned, for example, you have some events coming up with high profile authors and, all this other stuff. Is there anything else in the works that you can maybe give us a little?
Yes.
See, I knew.
Yes.
Because all writers have something hidden somewhere that they're going to pull out eventually.
So as Monica mentioned, she's got a workshop at the end of March about submission strategy.
Right.
And then on the 10th of May, we have a special workshop led by writer Andrea Zurlo on log lines. And log line is that special one sentence.
So important.
Yes, one sentence that describes what your book is about. So she will do a workshop on how to write those. And then on the 7th of June, Catherine Metzacapa, who is a writer who lives in Carrara, she's going to do a workshop on historical fiction.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, she's quite a historical fiction author.
She's very prolific.
Very, yes. And then in September, we'll have another workshop on pitching. Practice for the publishing day.
I really wish you could do that sooner.
Well, we will take that into consideration. If
maybe we could do an extra session earlier.
Because the pitching, that moment of when you sit down in front of an agent or an editor, requires a bit of preparation.
Just a little?
Yeah.
Just a little. Yeah. So tell me more about the publishing day.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue, because Publishing Day really has a focus on getting published for writers of all stripes and at every point in the journey, whether they have never published in their life or, like some of our writers in the community, they have published 6 or 8 books or more already. So in Publishing Day, we have a sort of collection of guests who come from all parts, mostly Europe, English speaking.
Not only Europe, we've got 2 coming
also
from
the U.S. this year.
New York, yes.
Okay. Nice.
But the focus is authors, agents, and editors, and then of course the writers who attend Publishing Day. There's a number of panels.
Well, the plan is maybe 3 panel discussions in the morning with these experts. So there will be 2 agents, an editor, and a best-selling author.
Wonderful.
Wait, it gets better.
Yes. So
I'm already I actually need to put the date in my calendar.
So that's the morning session.
Okay.
Actually divided in 3.
Okay.
There will be a buffet lunch on site. So
nice.
To favor interactions between the experts and the participants.
Perfect.
Then there will be the opportunity to have one-on-one pitching sessions, or not, if you're not ready to pitch, feedback. So
from an editor or agent or publisher.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So there will be that. There will also be an afternoon workshop that we'll announce later.
Okay.
And then a concluding aperitivo, so that, again to
that,
favor those connections.
Yeah, the magic.
And,
It's the magic.
and yes, absolutely, writers who want to pitch, but I would say also people who are students, for example, or others who are at the beginning of their journey, who just really want to learn more about the publishing industry, because the publishing industry has changed so much over time. It's not just the big 5 publishers anymore.
Not at all. It's,
Ebooks are so huge, and that was a big topic even 6 years ago when we last held this.
Yes. So it is a full day of learning more, meeting, building your network, and having new experiences.
This is wonderful.
Yes.
I mean, you do so much for the community. I don't know if you realize that. I mean, I know you do realize that, but something like this, even if you just did this one event, and you do a million other things, but doing something like this is so useful. You know, it's just, you're demystifying a whole process.
Indeed.
And it's a terrible process. I mean,
it can be very
it's
bumpy.
grueling. Yeah, it's intimidating.
Turbulent.
People tell you, and then people think they're helping you. Always. And it's so lovely. I listen to everybody. I try to, be open, and people say things like, oh, go, join this Facebook group. And, I joined this Facebook authors group, and it is the most, I don't know what I was thinking. It makes me feel terribly about myself every day. People writing things, but you find, I troll these groups because I like to get a culture, and I read, horror stories about self-publishing and, your book coming out all wonky, and, your book is your baby. Yeah. Everything you write is your baby, as far as I'm concerned, and you want your baby to have the best start in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, if you do something like this for a first-time author or even a seasoned author, because I have talked to a lot of writers who have a lot of trouble existing in this world. Mm-hmm. Writers who, and they don't necessarily have to be older, it's a question of like, do you feel comfortable putting yourself out there?
You want to play the game.
Well, you have to sell. You have to hustle.
You got to hustle.
You have to hustle. And even the best-selling books, you've got to hustle. Yeah. And so I think that in this, really, it's kind of a strange world that's emerged. It's very confusing for a lot of people. It is. Mm-hmm. And I really thank you for creating an opportunity where we can learn and we can talk to others, and then we can network, because that's the way you begin to make sense of these things. At least for me, it's been, talking to other writers and saying, like, okay, Lori, what next? I remember coming to your brainstorming session and be like, oh yeah, I've got the title. The title's not the problem. The problem is this other thing. And so I love the publishing day, and I'm going to be there, and I want to know, where is it going to be, and how many people are you expecting, more or less, based on past editions? Do you have an idea, sort of
We do.
Of course you do.
Yeah. So
in the past editions were sold out every year.
Of course they were.
Which was very, very satisfying. And so this year we are, may I say it, do you think? We are planning to be at the British Institute.
Wonderful.
Which has a much larger space.
They will host us in their space, yes.
And we are honestly hoping to have in the range of 50, 60, 70 participants if possible.
That sounds like a good number.
Yes.
And the other thing too about the publishing day that I think is so important is to realize how important face-to-face contacts are. I remember I went to my very first experience with this kind of thing was in 2012 or 13, I think. I went to the Women's Fiction Festival, which was an event that was held in Matera. Sadly, it no longer exists, but...
let's bring it back.
Yeah, well, not so easy.
We're bringing this.
We're doing Florence. So I remember meeting an agent that very first time. And I wrote back to that agent maybe 3 or 4 months later, subject line in the email, Matera Women's Fiction Festival, and the agent wrote right back to me. Amazing. And that's the sort of thing that only happens when you've met someone face to face.
I agree.
Now that did not lead to a publishing contract, but that doesn't matter. That kind of face-to-face contact.
You were in conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly what I hope people will take away from our conversation today, is how fundamental these in-person encounters are, how they foster this incredible sense of community, belonging, but also, really make you feel that you have people by your side, who just get it.
Yes.
You know, and that's an incredibly powerful thing for somebody who's, you know, really a seasoned writer or somebody who's just beginning, because, you know, I think a lot of writers that I've spoken to recently, for example, another person I met at the IndieCon who had, you know, her first book published was a memoir, and now she was breaking into a different genre. And so I think even those conversations, as you were saying, that you have with someone casually, you know, at the bar, during the coffee break, blah, blah, what are you working on? I'm working on this. And what do you think about this? What do you think? These incredible things begin to happen.
Yes.
Is there anything else, as we're coming to the end of the conversation, is there anything else exciting that we want to talk about? How can we, we'll direct people to the Florence Literary Society through the show notes. We'll put in all the relevant links for the publishing day, for all your upcoming wonderful events, and for the regular sort of community events that you organize. But as we close, is there anything else that you want to share or add to this wonderful conversation that I thank you both
encourage people to go to our website, florenceliterarysociety.com. You can sign up and become a member on the website. We have kept the annual fee very low to make it accessible for people.
Thank you.
But also, the more members we have, the more we can actually do. We really want people to signal themselves to us and say, hey, I'm in your community, no matter where they are. And that way, they can have a home here, we can know where they are, and everything will just grow from that. So I'm very excited about our growing membership and becoming a place and a kind of a calling card for all writers in Florence and beyond.
Yeah. I'd like to mention, for example, our local patrons and partners.
Yes, please.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So the British Institute is an important partner who hosts on their own also Meet the Author events and so on. Todo Modo, the bookshop, Libreria Todo Modo, Paperback Exchange, for example.
St. Mark's
English Church.
Yep.
Who else do we? Il Conventino, where a number of times events happen
The Florentine.
The Florentine, definitely. I know that I'm going to end up forgetting somebody.
Yes.
But the fact is that it's not just the writers in isolation.
Yeah.
We are part of the local fabric.
You really are.
We are not separate from our city, and it's important to see ourselves as part of what all is here, and to help each other. I think that too is such an important thing. Yeah. You know, Paperback Exchange, for example, you know, is the go-to for so many people, and they're always so supportive. Yeah. And we just want to say thank you to all of our local patrons and supporters.
And I want to say thank you to you both. And I want to say my big, again, thank you to the Florence Literary Society. You are such an important part of this city and of what we are all doing here to try to make it an even more beautiful place, right? And filling it with all of our stories and our conversations and our connections. I'm personally grateful, and I tell everybody about you. I wish you the best of luck for everything that's coming up. We'll put everything in the show notes, and we'll keep people posted before the big events as reminders. But I can't wait to participate in as much as possible. Thank you both.
Grazie mille.
Thank you, Fosca, and good luck for you.
Thank you. Grazie a voi. Good luck. Thank you again to Lori, Monica, and the Florence Literary Society. I really encourage you all to become members, follow them, sign up for their newsletter, and participate in their incredible workshops and events if and when you're in town. You'll find all of their info in the show notes. So, in keeping with today's theme, I'd like to end the podcast with a quote from fellow U.S. expat in Tuscany, iconic writer Frances Mays. Travel changes you. As you move through this life and this world, you change things slightly. You leave marks behind, however small. And in return, life and travel leaves marks on you. So, special thanks to our sponsor, Exclusive Connection, for this episode and for crafting luxury experiences that let you think deeply and travel beautifully and live your story in one of the world's most inspiring cities and countries. Discover your Florence and your Italy at exclusiveconnection.it. Grazie mille e alla prossima volta.